Who would believe that a war could begin? A dictator stands before a map of Europe, watching Hitler crush France in 6 weeks, and whispers to himself. That single thought, born of envy, wrapped in pride, ignited one of the most. Benito Mussolini, the man who dreamed of reviving the Roman Empire, decided to invade Greece, a small, mountainous nation with half the on the 28th of October 1940. At 3 a.m., an ultimatum arrived in Athens. Prime Minister Ioannis Metaxas, old and ill, read it and uttered one word. The next morning, Italian tanks rolled down from Albania, dragging dust, hauling blades of steel, convinced they'd extinguish a tiny flame of resistance within days. But that flame was fed by belief. The mountains turned traitor. Autumn rains became mud. Winter snow swallowed tanks. Balkan winds shredded supply lines. Within weeks, at the Battle of Pindus, 10,000 Italian troops were routed not just by soldiers, but by peasants, women, and partisans. Mothers carried ammunition up icy slopes. Girls stitched coats. Mussolini even whispered the unthinkable. Use gas, if you must. His generals refused. We are soldiers, not butchers. A war born of. By March 1941, Italy had lost over 150,000 men. Hundreds of tanks lay rusting in the Albanian mud. Greece, the nation that should have surrendered, was advancing into enemy territory. In Rome, Mussolini hid the numbers. If Britain survived the Battle of Britain through planes and radar, Greece endured without either, armed only with courage. If Napoleon perished in the snow, numbers spoke louder than propaganda. 500,000 Italians marched. Barely half came home. 90,000 Greeks died, but their homeland endured. One humiliated empire begged for rescue. In the black and white reels of history, Greece stands small yet luminous, while Italy's arrogance collapses into dust. And once again, history whispered its timeless verdict. When power is built on delusion, when empires fall, history doesn't shout. It simply points toward the snow-covered ridges of the Balkans. What happens when arrogance collapses and another empire? When Mussolini's Roman dream sank into Balkan snow, a darker figure in Europe stirred. Hitler, the man who vowed efficiency above all, watched Italy stumble and muttered, By early 1941, Greece had pushed Italian forces deep into Albania. Mussolini's divisions, once 500,000 strong, were exhausted, frostbitten, starving, and if the Balkans burned unchecked, Britain could land troops there, threaten the southern flank of the Reich, and block Germany's path toward the oil fields of Romania. The rescue of Mussolini. On the 6th of April 1941, dawn broke with the roar of 700,000 German troops. 1,200. It was called Operation Merida, a name that sounded elegant, almost gentle, hiding the cold precision beneath. In 17, Athens fell. The Acropolis, that ancient crown of Western civilization, now stood under a swastika flag, a photograph so haunting. But conquest, once again, carried its curse. Hitler's lightning campaign was delayed by the terrain, by the stubbornness of Greek and British troops, by the same Balkan mud that had swallowed Still, victory fed his myth. On the 20th of May 1941, Germany launched Operation Mercury, the first major airborne invasion in history. Over 15,000 paratroopers plunged from the sky above Crete, falling like iron rain. The island was taken, but at here lies the cruel paradox of power. In saving Mussolini, the diversion into Greece delayed Operation Barbarossa by 6 crucial weeks. When German panzers finally rolled into Soviet soil on June 22, the summer clock had already started ticking toward the Russian winter. Those 6 weeks would later. Historians still debate how much the Greek campaign altered the course of the war. Some call it minor, others call it fatal. But numbers tell a story that opinions cannot erase. Germany lost 5,000 men in Greece and Crete. Italy lost 150,000, and beyond those numbers lies the uncounted, the civilians starved, the villages burned, the children. Compare it to Dunkirk, and you'll see a mirror. In France, the Allies escaped by sea. Compare it to Stalingrad, and you'll sense a prophecy. One delay, one prideful misstep, rippled forward. The Balkans campaign was more than a footnote. It was the hinge of destiny. A war begun from Mussolini's envy ended with Hitler's exhaustion. The map of Europe tilted in black and white newsreels. German soldiers raised the Reich flag over Athens, but beneath their boots lie the ashes of delay. The invisible clock ticking toward Moscow, toward defeat. And as the dust of Merita settled, the question remained. If an empire must be, the answer would come soon. Written not in proclamations but in famine, rebellion, and the right. What does victory mean when the victors starve the land they liberated? What remains of conquest when the only. By mid-1941, the swastika fluttered over the Acropolis, and the world believed Greece was finished. But history, like the mountains of Epirus, does not crumble easily. Beneath the shadow of 3 flags, German, Italian, Bulgarian, the Greeks' occupation came not as thunder, but as suffocation. The Germans took the ports, the Italians, the countryside, the Bulgarians, the north. Grain shipments were seized. Farmers forced to hand over harvests. The winter of 1941-1942 arrived early. Historians would later count 300,000 civilian deaths, not from bullets, but from the quiet precision of hunger. It was a famine engineered by policy. Yet within that darkness, something unbreakable stirred. When Mussolini's men patrolled roads, they met not soldiers, but shadows. In the mountains, resistance grew like wildfire. Elas, the communist brigades, and Edas, the nationalist fighters. The Gorgopotamos Bridge, a steel artery of occupation, was blown sky high in 1942 by Greeks working with British saboteurs. The explosion. Compare this to France under Vichy. Submission disguised as governance. Greece, starved and shattered, still chose defiance. Compare it to the Netherlands, or the occupiers responded with fire. Entire villages, Kalavrita, Distimo, Kameno, were wiped off the map. Their men shot, their women burned alive. It was retaliation by arithmetic. 100 Greeks for 1 German. But even as towns vanished, by 1943, Italy collapsed, and its soldiers, those who had once invaded Greece, were now hunted by their former allies, the Germans. The irony was absolute. The invaders of 1940 now begged the Greeks for shelter. In 1944, as the Reich began to retreat, German columns hauled their machinery north, burning bridges behind them, dragging dust across a land they could never tame. Athens rose again, not to cheers. What had Mussolini's ambition achieved? A campaign meant to prove Italy's strength had instead drained Hitler's army, delayed his timetable, and doomed the Eastern Front. A small nation. When you look at photographs from 1944, the starving faces, the torn flags, you see not defeat, but testimony. A people stripped, and as the narrator's voice fades, one question remains, sharp, inevitable, and human. If conquest leaves only ashes, was it ever victory? If hunger breeds courage,